Break out the mood rings and slip on the platform shoes. It's the Super 70s, the decade that brought us Elton John, Donnie Marie, and Fonzie are back on WHPC. Join me, Ron Stevens, as we count down the top 20 hits of a featured week and hear lots of bonus hits from that memorable decade. So listen to the Super 70s on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College.
The Super 70s, Tuesday at 12 a.m. and Saturday at 7 a.m. on 90.3 WHPC.
WHPC Garden City, New York, the voice of Nassau Community College, with a soft, easy blend to our music, plus the very best of informational and educational programming.
Welcome to From the Pressbox, right here on 90.3 FM, WHPC, Garden City, New York. My name is Rob Leonard, and joining me is my co-host, Tim Leonard. And yes, we are brothers. We have to mention that because our cousin just won the
Kawhi Leonard.
Kawhi Leonard just won, and it was part of the San Antonio Spurs. He won the World Championship.
Yes. We did try to book him for today's show, but we're unsuccessful. We're going to work on that for future.
I think he has other things to do.
Future episode.
But
after
the
parade, after the Riverwalk parade, and after the Spurs celebrate, we're going to see if we can get Kawhi on the show.
And of course, we'll see him at the family barbecue down the road.
Down in Maryland.
Down in Maryland. Yeah, Kevin's already preparing it. So,
no doubt.
Our cousin Kevin. So we look forward to that. Actually, Kawhi. How you say his name?
Kawhi. Yes.
Is not our cousin. Though we'll say he's our cousin. Why not?
He was yesterday.
Well, he was. And you know what? One of the things when you watch a championship is to see who sort of steps up to the plate. You expect a LeBron. You expect people like that. Our cousin stepped up to the plate.
Oh, absolutely. That's. I mean, if we can start the show there for this week's episode. But
we should say that in about 15 minutes we have George Vecsey, author of 8 World Cups. He'll be our guest talking about the
and
World
legendary
Cup.
New York Times columnist.
Of course.
Let's not forget that he's not just some guy who wrote a book. He's a sports writing legend. But let's talk about the NBA Finals and Kawhi Leonard's impact, because it wasn't just offensively. It was defensively. He gave LeBron James all kind of headaches, and just really kind of turned that series where, the Spurs won game 1 pretty big. They lost game 2 by 2 points. And at that point, I think a lot of people expected the Heat to take over the series, and they expected LeBron to, be the guy who really put his imprint on the series. And instead, not only did Kawhi Leonard put his imprint on the series offensively, but he did so also by making LeBron James's life miserable.
Yeah.
LeBron James had to work for every basket he got.
And he played well.
He did play well, but the reason he had such a difficult time scoring is because Kawhi Leonard was all over him. And this is, you're talking about a 22-year-old kid. I mean, he is a youngster, especially in the NBA, and for him to have such an impact. That's a great thing for the Spurs going forward. I mean, obviously their core is aging, to say the least.
Right.
Tim Duncan, there's talk about possible retirement.
He's 38 years old.
Yeah, he's up there. Ginobili is also another guy who's in his mid to late 30s, and Tony Parker isn't as old, only because he started his career so early. He started at 19, but he's a guy with a lot of mileage on his legs, and you have to wonder how much longer he has. Kawhi Leonard is the building block for the future in San Antonio, and likely will be the reason that this team probably will not have a kind of bottoming out that a lot of successful teams have, where your core gets old or you don't have enough money to pay everybody, and then all of a sudden now we have problems. Now we have to rebuild. Now we're going to be miserable for however many years. Not to the extent like the Knicks, but let's say, but it goes that way and goes in cycles in the NBA. And the way it looks right now for the Spurs, they're not going to have that down cycle for could be at least another decade.
No, and I think it's very important. I didn't realize until after the series was over Spurs have won 5 championships since '99.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
that's
five. That's pretty good.
Well, the reason nobody speaks of them really as a dynasty is because they haven't done it in a row.
Right.
But they're always a contender, and they're always the team or one of the teams from the West where you say, this is a dangerous team, and this is a team that we need to prepare for in terms of the finals, and this is a team that has a chance to win a title. And, they were in the finals last year, obviously, didn't get it done against the Heat. This year, people went crazy about Tim Duncan and saying that he's making a Joe Namath prediction and this and that. I'll tell you what, the Spurs had no trouble winning the series. It wasn't even the fact that they won the series. They won the series convincingly.
Yeah, they did.
And Kawhi Leonard was a big part of that. I wrote down some numbers last night while I was doing my research for the show. By the way, I do want to say Kawhi Leonard, this show's favorite player in the NBA, followed closely by Myers Leonard of the Portland Trailblazers.
Hey.
Just in case anybody's wondering. But Kawhi Leonard last night had 22 points and 10 rebounds. That came after 20 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks, 3 steals in Game 4. And in Game 3, he had a team-high 29 points on 10 of 13 shooting. That is a guy who is having a phenomenal series. And like I said, plus that the non-scene stat is all the defense he played against LeBron James. And Dwayne Wade did not have a good series for the Heat. Bosh was okay. But that was it. Mario Chalmers wound up getting benched, who's supposed to be their starting point guard. The Heat started a backcourt last night of Ray Allen and Dwayne Wade. Now, does that not scream age? I mean, that's like a Social Security backcourt. Ray Allen is more than likely going to retire.
Right.
And as great a career as he's had, he's not a young man. And Dwayne Wade is a guy who, while he may not be old, his knees have a ton of mileage on them, and he said after the series that he's not going to blame anything physically, but Dwayne Wade looked tired, gassed. Use whatever word you want. He was not explosive like he needed to be for the Heat to have a chance to win this series.
Of course, the other question on the other side of the coin, we know San Antonio won, and they did it convincingly. Does this take away from what LeBron has done so far? And I'd say no. But some people have said, oh, well, this proves that LeBron's not human and blah, blah, blah. Or, whatever. It just makes no sense about here's a guy who's done really well so far. And just to say he lost in a championship, so what?
The people who want to judge, first of all, these are such knee-jerk reactions that I laugh at them because it's silly. It's silly to judge somebody off of the last series that was played. You look at, I'll tell you what this series did show, and the thing that should be screaming out to anybody who's ever even watched a single basketball game is that team basketball is the way to go, and that's how the game is meant to be played. The Spurs shared the ball. They make passes. There was some kind of crazy stat that I remember we last week when we were talking to Andy Vasquez from the Bergen Record that the Spurs had, it was like hundreds more passes of the ball during the game. They share the ball. They look for the best shot. That's how basketball is supposed to be played. Basketball is not supposed to be played, hey, get the ball to Carmelo Anthony over on the left elbow, let him dribble for 10 or 12 seconds and try and back his guy into the lane, and then hope the turnaround jumper goes in. That's not basketball.
Well, that's Carmelo Anthony basketball.
That's losing basketball.
Well, yeah.
Basketball is meant to be – the ball is supposed to be shared. The ball gets worked around. You pass the ball quickly enough that you can catch a defender out of position, shot goes up. That's basketball. And the Spurs showed that because they didn't need one guy to be a star. And Kawhi Leonard for the last 3 games was their best player. And he wasn't supposed to be their best. He's supposed to be their 4th best player.
Right.
But he showed that, hey, 22 years old, this is an emerging guy, and this is somebody who a lot of people slept on when he came out of San Diego State because he was a low first-round pick. A lot of teams could have selected him much earlier, and they just, for whatever reason, didn't want to. I think he was kind of seen as a tweener, but here's a guy with a ton of heart, a guy who really wants to get better. Popovich was saying after last night's game, the kid, he's the first one to the gym. He's the last one out of there. He wants the coaches to push him to get better and show him and tell him how to get better.
And he doesn't seem to have a big ego either.
He's got no ego. The funny thing was last night, after he was announced as the MVP, Popovich was laughing. And the reason he was laughing is because Leonard, the last thing he wants to do is talk about himself. I mean, it's kind of like me in that way.
Oh, of course.
But it's
modesty is your middle name.
Exactly. But he's a guy who, I mean, he's basically the younger version of Tim Duncan. He's that kind of player where he's not going to be the guy who draws attention to himself. He's not going to do anything stupid off the court.
Right.
He's a kid who's got his head on straight. He's got a world of talent to him, and he's only getting better.
Well, you were talking about hitting the open man, and nowadays it's called the triangle offense.
Well, in some cases.
In some cases. But what I think about, every time I hear that talked about with Phil Jackson now that he's running the Knicks, I think back to Red Holzman, because that was Red's way of playing basketball, hit the open man. And who learned from Red Holzman?
Well,
Phil Jackson.
Phil Jackson. I don't know that the triangle was necessarily Red's thing, but
he didn't call it a triangle. He called it hit the open man.
But it's different. It's different things. The triangle relies on a big man to kind of be
that part's true.
Your
but
buffer.
Willis Reed was a
there are probably some similarities there, but the triangle is kind of Phil Jackson's thing, and that's how he likes to run. But I mean, what you said before in terms of the Spurs now and the Knicks back then, there's tons of similarities. That was those Knicks. You could name any guy on those teams, whether it was Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe, Bill Bradley, Dave DeBusschere, Willis Reed. Any of those guys on any given night could have been your leading scorer.
Right.
And with the Spurs, it's the same thing. Tony Parker last night, he missed something like his first 10 shots or 11 shots or whatever it was, and the Spurs were up by 20. Yeah. I mean, there's your point guard and one of the guys who's supposed to be a go-to scorer for you, and arguably having, not even arguably, not having a good shooting game, but showing that this team has depth, they have options, they have other ways to go, and he doesn't necessarily have to make baskets for them to be effective. And that's what last night showed, is that part of your game or team can be suffering, and you can still dominate a team that's supposed to be the best team in the game.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show that maybe Miami isn't the best team anymore.
Well, Miami's aging. I mean, that's the thing. LeBron is. I mean, there's a couple of things, and people tend to focus on the big three, and LeBron and Wade and Bosh, and they're still obviously three very good players. But Mario Chalmers, who's supposed to be their starting point guard, wound up getting benched. Didn't have a good season this year. They wound up benching Udonis Haslem, who is, he's not a great big man, but he's effective. He's a guy that's going to get you rebounds. He's a guy that's going to do the dirty work, play some defense, do a lot of that stuff that doesn't necessarily wind up in box scores. And outside shooting wasn't as good as it has been in the past. I mean, their bench construction was definitely not nearly as good as it was for the last couple of years. And that's a big deal because those minutes need to get played. LeBron's not playing 48 minutes. Dwayne Wade certainly isn't playing 48 minutes. You'd be lucky if Dwayne Wade plays 30 minutes.
Right.
And Bosh, the same thing. So there's generally, I want to say, about 25% of an NBA game, because that's 12 minutes. Stars will usually play somewhere around 36 or 38 minutes. But you're talking 12 minutes where your bench guys need to be in there.
Right.
So you need to have effective guys. Otherwise, you're going to get run over.
Before we have to take a break, Derek Fisher, now coach of the Knicks.
I thought we were going to do that later after. Let's talk about that later. That's a bigger topic than a couple of minutes. But yes, Derek Fisher is the coach of the Knicks. So yes,
well, we'll see.
I'll confirm that for you.
Well, yeah,
as reported on From the Pressbox, Derek Fisher is the coach of the New York Knicks.
Oh yes, we reported it first.
Yes,
we're taking that ESPN thing. As reported on ESPN.
Exactly.
Well, and 14 other places too.
Phil Moshnick will love me for that.
Oh, so one more thing about you were talking about the Spurs. Bob Raceman mentioned it in his column this week. It was talking about how they pass so much that it's not something you see as a highlight on SportsCenter, and he quoted
Mark Jackson, yes,
saying, "Well, they passed it around, and then didn't end in a dunk, so it's not going to be on SportsCenter."
Well,
he said it on ESPN too.
Yes, and I actually Phil Mushnick had that in today's column in the Post.
Oh, he did. Okay,
he mentioned it because actually ESPN did show it on their highlights package and included the comment from Jackson
Oh,
in it.
really? Well, they sort of had to.
Which was good because it's a little bit self-deprecating, which is good to see. It's good to see ESPN show a little bit of humility because it's incredibly rare. But it's also